Now we will talk about levers of influence, what levers the Democrats use on Biden, what levers we can use on Trump, and what levers Trump can influence on Putin, and more. That's what I thought. Let's figure it out right now. My name is Ira Uzlova. Friends, as you know, as you can see, Uriel Epshtein, Executive Director of the American nonprofit organization Renew Democracy Initiative, is with me. Uriel, hello. Nice to see you.
Hello. Very nice.
Western media are full of reports that the Democrats have postponed the nomination of Joe Biden as the Democratic candidate, postponing it to the first week of August, although this event was supposed to take place in the last week of July. This is reported by the New York Times, citing sources, specifying that online voting has been postponed from next week to the first week of August. At the same time, CNN reports that former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tried to convince Biden to abandon the run. According to the Axios portal, Biden is gradually heeding calls to withdraw from the race and may announce his decision this weekend. In principle, as we predicted, against this background, it became known that Biden fell ill with COVID-19. Perhaps this may serve as a cover for his withdrawal from the race. At least some of our experts express such conspiracy assumptions, although it is possible that this is not the case. When Biden, as reported by CNN, asks Democrats and donors whether Kamala Harris can compete with Donald Trump, do we have an answer to this question? And what is the answer to the question of what levers can be used during this week and a half to convince Biden to get out of the game?
Yes, I am increasingly confident that Biden will still leave, as we discussed last time. I thought then that Biden would leave. Now I am more sure that he will leave. And it's not just Nancy Pelosi who says this. The most important event was when Adam Schiff publicly stated that Biden must go. As one of the most influential Democrats, his public stance matters a lot. But now we're hearing rumors from 4 different sources that Nancy Pelosi told him about it, too. We've also heard Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer tell him the same thing, even though it's all discussed behind closed doors. But this cannot go on forever. As I predicted earlier, these conversations will sooner or later go beyond closed doors. Very soon, all these conversations will turn into open conversations if Biden never leaves. But I think he's getting closer to that decision because he just doesn't have a choice. Again, on the one hand, he is losing support among the Democrats. Already sponsors stopped $90 million in his company. This means that they are now losing money. Democrats in Congress fear that if Biden stays, Trump may not only win the White House, but Republicans will also be able to win in both houses of Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives. This means that the threat here is huge. And, of course, I think not only for the Democrats. I believe that there is a threat to the American Republic and, of course, to our allies, including Ukraine.
Okay, if the epic of Stop Biden ends as we predict, and someone else comes to replace him, then in the next episode we will see who cannot be stopped. Who is this other candidate?
And will someone else be there? Well, I think the most likely option would be Kamala Harris. It will still be her. To be honest, professionally, I would prefer one of the governors we discussed last time. But the simplest option is that Kamala Harris can take Biden's place, since she is already vice president, and the entire campaign can continue without significant changes. Thus, the campaign itself will remain unchanged. All bank accounts, all infrastructure, all this can remain as it is. This means that this will be the easiest option, but, of course, this is not guaranteed. Now the question is, if it is not Kamala Harris, then perhaps someone from those we discussed last time will come in her place. I think nothing has changed. It could be the governors of Pennsylvania, Kentucky, California, or Michigan. These are the 4 states where governors, centrist left-wing Democrats, are very popular. But then I recently had a new idea, a very interesting one. If Kamala Harris is the candidate for president, why not choose Admiral Bill McRaven, for example, as vice president? He is one of the most important former leaders of our military. And the contrast between him and Republican J.D. Vance would certainly be enormous. And here, although few people are discussing it publicly now, it would be a very interesting and unexpected decision if Kamala Harris chose him as vice president. And, in general, I think that this would probably strengthen it.
Such an unexpected decision would mean expected support for Ukraine and karma, not sleepless nights for Europe.
Absolutely. This is exactly the key idea, that there is absolute chaos around the world now. I think people see leaders like Admiral McRaven as responsible individuals who know how to defend the country and the free world. And we need such a person in moments when the situation is becoming uncontrollable and dictators are becoming more and more powerful. And I think the average American will look very positively at that. And this is especially true at a time when Trump has chosen as his candidate J.D. Vance, who openly supports Putin and is largely at odds with traditional American strategic interests. What he says is not only not in the interests of Europe and the interests of Ukraine. Most importantly, it is against our own strategic interests. And a man like Admiral McRaven could, I think, demonstrate this very well to all Americans. What Vance says is not America first, but just the other way around. That result would be America last. America will be in a weakened position if Vance does what he says he intends to do.
We will talk about it later, but for now, I will clarify. Could the tandem of Harris and McRaven really tip the tandem of Trump and Vance on the scales?
Well, there is no guarantee here. I am ready to predict that Biden will leave. I am not ready to make a prediction who can win this election. This is too unforeseeable. But I can say that today, if Biden does not leave, then Trump has at least a 90% chance of winning this election. If Biden leaves, and, say, Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee is paired with Admiral McRaven or one of these governors that I talked about, then I think the odds will be much more equal, about 50-50. This means that it is impossible to predict an absolutely accurate result, but the chance of success would be at least 50%. And since McRaven would have been a completely unexpected choice, it could, in general, wake up voters. Those who sided with Trump, seeing him as a strong and brave man, might reconsider their minds. Right now, I'm sorry, but you can't compare a man like Trump who avoided the Vietnam War by using deception. He claimed that he had problems with his legs, calling it bone spurs. In those days, wealthy people often resorted to such tricks. They paid doctors to provide medical certificates confirming non-existent problems in order to avoid military service. And comparing someone like Trump with someone like McRaven, who served his country for more than 30 years, risking his life, is, of course, heaven and earth. So, I think it would be a very interesting choice. But again, I want to say that this would be an unexpected choice. I haven't heard anyone discuss it yet. That's it. We recently discussed this with Harry Casper and several other experts. But this is such a unique thought. I hope that the Democrats, perhaps, will at least discuss such an idea. I don't know if they'll do it or not, but at least I think it makes sense to think about it.
An unexpected move. Now we will think about this too. We hope that this will also be considered where necessary. To these 90% chances of Trump, according to your estimates, how many percent did the situation with the rap deer add? And would he continue to use it for the next 4 months with such a painful expression on his face and that walk of a dejected victim?
Before all this happened, before the debate and before the assassination attempt, I thought that Trump had about a 75 to 80% chance of winning. Now with this wrapped ear, he has at least 90%. The only reason why I say that Biden still has at least these 10% chances against Trump is because politics is an unpredictable thing. Maybe in a month, Trump will say something absolutely terrible again, and people will react to it. But, unfortunately, we see that every interview with Biden, every of his public speeches is accompanied by mistakes and incorrect statements. He always speaks weakly and softly, while people often prefer aggression and a show of strength. And while Trump often says nonsense, to say the least, his aggressive and strong style appeals to people. Recently, Biden, in a speech, tried to announce a change in taxes, planning to set an upper limit on rent increases of 5%. However, he, blinking nervously and trying to read the text on the teleprompter, eventually made a mistake and said that the maximum increase would be not 5%, but $55.
Высказал, что они хотят сделать максимум не 5%, а $55.
Where did these $55 come from? No one understands. And, unfortunately, these mistakes will only continue and increase. And here's what really scares me. Even if Trump says something provocative again, as he did in 2016 or 2020, Biden, as often happens, will make another mistake in a day or two. In that case, people will immediately focus on his weaknesses, instead of paying attention to what Trump says about the world, about Russia, and about the future of America. And if you listen to what he says, it's not so optimistic. It does not show what can be. He constantly repeats that everything is terrible, everything is bad, and only he, alone, is able to fix everything and save the country. He presents himself almost as Jesus Christ. And today, looking at the photos where he has blood on his face, you might think that many in the States perceive him almost as a divine figure.
And I also noticed that he talks about many things in the past tense. In a recent interview with Bloomberg in late June, Trump described his Mar-a-Lago residence with pomp, including details like balloons and a cap. He says that if he had been in office, Putin would never have attacked Ukraine, claiming that he warned him not to meddle. But this is all the past. And history, as we know, does not simply know the past in conditional tense. It's all already happened. It is possible that Trump himself, like Devens, who changes his views every 8 years, lacks a clear vision of the future and a clear understanding of decisions. In fact, as we can see, they will act improvisationally, relying on random circumstances and on the information they will receive later.
Absolutely. Moreover, they don't even know history anymore. Trump says Putin would never have attacked Ukraine under him. But, forgive me, Putin did not attack Ukraine in 2022. There was already a war during the Trump administration. Putin attacked Ukraine in 2014. And Trump said that he would end this war in one day. So why didn't he end that war in the 4 years he was president? It's simple. He tries to change history. Here is the second point. They lack a clear vision of the future and ideology. All they have are simply reactions to current events. An example of this is J.D. Vance, who has radically changed his opinion about Trump. Let me remind your viewers that recently, just a few years ago, J.D. Vance called Trump the American Hitler. Even I have never used such words, and no one in the pro-democratic world who supports a free America has said it either. I emphasize that I am neither a Democrat nor a Republican. I am an independent analyst who reacts to what is happening. Now, Vance's change of heart from Trump being the Hitler of America to that he is now the Jesus Christ of America clearly demonstrates his fickleness and lack of principle.
Что сейчас Трамп — это американский Иисус Христос, Это показывает, какой он человек.
Yes, there is such a thing, but there are other opinions. So far, Politico reports that J.D. Vance is a potential disaster for Ukraine and Europe. As I mentioned, Pavlo Klimkin, our former foreign minister and veteran diplomat, argues that while J.D. Vance is not overtly anti-Ukrainian, he is skepticism in a double sense. Vance tends to limit U.S. intervention abroad by promoting isolationist policies. Apparently, his main focus will be on the Asian region and strategic rivalry with China. Klimkin also notes that Vance emphasizes that he is not in favor of a complete stop in aid to Ukraine, leaving room for maneuver and possible pressure. Maybe we panic too soon?
No.
No.
No, unfortunately, not too early. I'm sorry, but 2 years ago, or more precisely, about a year ago, J.D. Vance was performing, and there's a video of him saying he just doesn't care about Ukraine. He does not care about the results of this war. You can show this video to your viewers later. It exists. I can share it myself. Moreover, we must not forget what kind of environment he is in now. He changed his mind about Trump because it became politically advantageous to him. Now it is not profitable for him to change his opinion about Ukraine, because in the environment in which he is, many adhere to this view. Congressman Matt Gaetz, an important ally of J.D. Vance, recently spoke and said that discussing the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO has no strategic benefit for the United States. He suggested that it would be better for the United States and for the Western world if Russia joined NATO. Here he is, again, speaking publicly in a video interview on Newsmax, saying that the discussion of Ukraine's accession to NATO is not strategically beneficial for the United States. He suggested that it would be better for the United States and for the Western world if Russia joined NATO. This kind of opinion is expressed by others, for example, Tucker Carlson, David Sachs, Elon Musk, and J.D. Vance came from this environment. So, I understand why he changed his opinion about Trump, because it helped him for him, and now he will be a candidate for the Vice President of the United States, thanks to the fact that he changed his mind, but I just don't see why he would change his opinion about Ukraine in the opposite direction. It is possible, of course, maybe someone will make their way to him and explain to him why it is personally beneficial for him to change his opinion to Ukraine, but I think that this is unlikely.
And why can it be personally beneficial to him? What leverage can we use on J.D. Vance and possibly Donald Trump, and through whom? Boris Johnson came, maybe through such speakers and intermediaries.
Yes, perhaps this is the best chance. My organization, the Renew Democracy Initiative, brought former British Prime Minister Liz Truss to the United States. We also invited Boris Johnson, but he couldn't come. Liz Truss held meetings with Republicans in the States, and we ended up meeting with 22 Republicans in Congress, of whom 13 support helping Ukraine.
Республиканцами в Конгрессе, из этих 22 13 голосовали за помощь Ukraine.
So, well, after all, there may have been some result. Yes, it is. It is important to us that Ukraine and all those who support the defense of the free world continue to work with people like Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and religious Christians. Our goal is to join forces to defend common values and principles. This is a very important question. How did you manage to convince Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, to finally start supporting assistance to Ukraine? He was persuaded by religious Christians who met with him and explained that it is not Ukraine that is fighting against Christians, but Russia, which persecutes and sometimes tortures them, not only in Ukraine, but also in Russia itself. And such arguments are extremely important, especially when we explain why it is necessary to support Ukraine. This is not just a matter of morality, although many of us believe believe that supporting Ukraine is morally correct. Unfortunately, such arguments will not work here. We need to come up with other arguments. We need to come up with arguments why this is beneficial to conservatives, why it is beneficial to religious ones. Why is it beneficial, for example, for business, for international trade? We need to use such arguments to try to convince people like J.D. Vance and Trump.
But what else do the following figures tell us? According to a poll conducted by USA Press and the National Center for Public Opinion Research at the University of Chicago, 60% of respondents do not have enough information about J.D. Vance to form an informed opinion about him.
Лишь 9% дали такой же ответ касательно соперницы фактически Венса, ну пока что в таком статусе, да, Камалы Харрис, статус которой может и повыситься.
At the same time, the name of J.D. Vance is not well known to both Democrats and Republicans. 27% of respondents consider it a choice that they can approve of, perceiving it as positive. At the same time, every fifth respondent disagrees with this. What does this mean? Or is Trump not guided by such figures? This was done even before Vance was announced as vice president, but nonetheless. Can American elections and Republicans influence Stevens' behavior?
Okay, so to the first question. No, such numbers do not affect Trump. We have seen this many times. Trump does not listen to the polls. And sometimes, in general, it turns out that he is right. And, therefore, it is necessary, I would say, sometimes to be skeptical about this. What influenced Trump when he decided to choose Vance? I think these are two reasons. First, it is clear to everyone that Vance's choice was risky. Instead of choosing a more traditional Republican who could allay fears that Trump was too radical, he chose Vance, an outspoken nationalist and far-right nationalist. Trump chose the most aggressive possible candidate. I think he did it first of all after the assassination attempt.
И он выбрал, в общем-то, самого такого агрессивного из возможных кандидатов. Я думаю, что он это сделал первое, после того, как было это покушение.
I think he made that decision on Sunday or Saturday right after the assassination attempt, because he realized that his chances had increased significantly. That meant he couldn't lose that election, and so could take a chance by choosing a candidate like J.D. Vance, who would do whatever Trump wanted.
И выбрать такого, как J.D. Vance, который он знает, будет делать все, что Трамп хочет.
We must not forget why former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence is not the vice presidential candidate with Trump today. They fell out because Trump wanted Pence to unconstitutionally stop the 2020 election and prevent Biden from winning.
Pence неконституционно остановил выборы в 2020 году. And
that would be absolutely unconstitutional. And Mike Pence still decided to follow the Constitution, comply with American laws, and not fulfill what Trump demanded of him. That's why Trump would have dumped him. And now we see that J.D. Vance is not quite like that. J.D. Vance is ready to change his mind 180 degrees to improve his personal political position. And it is very beneficial for Trump. Trump knows that J.D. Vance will not refuse him anything. And if Trump says something to him, does something unconstitutional, he will, I think, certainly do it. Well, the first reason Trump chose Vance is that after the assassination attempt, he realized that his chances had increased significantly, and he could take a risk by choosing such a candidate. The second reason is the influence of people like Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and David Sachs. They persuaded Trump to choose Vance because it was profitable from a business point of view. It should not be forgotten that J.D. Vance is a former investor and businessman who will promote economically beneficial decisions for people like Musk and Sachs, including in foreign policy issues. The question here is very important, because Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and David Sachs consider foreign policy issues, especially those related to Ukraine, to be key. It seems to me that for them it has become almost a psychological issue. I don't understand their hatred of Ukraine. It goes beyond interests, politics, and everything else. This is due to some psychological reasons that I do not understand, to be honest. However, I believe that these three votes, as well as Trump's son, together had a significant impact on Trump and convinced him to choose J.D. Vance.
они вот вчетвером очень хорошо повлияли на Трампа, и его, я думаю, так и убедили выбрать J.D. Ванса.
How will this affect the elections? This was a risky move for Trump, since most Americans do not know who Vance is. When they find out that Vance is absolutely against all abortion and wants abortion to be completely banned in all states of the United States, and also that he is against our allies, including Ukraine, Western and Eastern Europe, it can play against Trump.
Во всех штатах США, что он абсолютно против наших союзников, тем включена Украина, но он против тоже и Западной Европы, и Восточной Европы.
And it's going to be a risk for him, and I think the Democrats here will feel like they have an opportunity if they can find someone other than Biden.
Возможность, если они сумеют найти кого-то, кроме Байдена.
But such solidarity of the opposition, which, apparently, is already taking place between Trump and Vance, between sponsors, between Musk, does this not pose the risk of usurpation of power within America itself?
Of course. A huge risk. That's what we're afraid of, honestly. Again, I don't think America will change overnight. I don't think we're going to become Russia, North Korea, anything. But I think that we will see a little political change in this country. And since J.D. Vance is ready to fulfill all of Trump's demands, and they have been preparing for this for 4 years, we must remember that in 2016 they were not ready to govern the country. No one expected Trump to win. Trump himself did not expect his victory in 2016. And since J.D. Vance is ready to fulfill all of Trump's demands, and they have been preparing for this for 4 years, we must remember that in 2016 they were not ready to govern the country. No one expected Trump to win. Trump himself did not expect his victory in 2016.
Они хотят уволить 50 тысяч рабочих в правительстве и их поменять на более лояльных людей.
And they want to absolutely destroy the Department of Justice.
Уничтожить Department of Justice.
I forgot how to say it in Russian.
This is the Department of Justice, the Ministry of Justice, yes, in fact.
Thank you, Ministry of Justice. They seek to completely subordinate him, so that the director of this department reports exclusively to Trump and carries out only his orders. In general, I believe that the risk here is huge.
In general, я думаю, что риск тут огромный.
If they win and can implement their plans, I think America will begin to resemble what Poland was 4 years ago.
Я думаю, что Америка начнет становиться более похожей к, скажем, к тому, что Польша была 4 года назад.
So it will begin to go in that direction, a little closer to Hungary, to Orban.
Приближаться к Венгрии, к Орбану.
And here the risk is serious. And even that could be worse than Poland, because even under the Kaczynski rule, Poland understood the importance of the free world and was willing to work with Europe, Ukraine, and America in support of free values. Orban and Hungary are absolutely not ready for such cooperation at the moment, and I am afraid that if people like Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and David Sachs can get such power, and I think they can, it will lead to serious consequences.
Такие, как Илон Маск, Такер Карлсон, Дэвид Сакс, сумеют получить какую-то такую власть, и я думаю, что они получат.
We should not forget that it was recently announced that Elon Musk will be allocating $45 million a month to support Trump. This means that every month before the election, he will contribute this amount to support his campaign.
Каждый месяц. Значит, каждый месяц до выборов он будет давать 45 миллионов, чтобы поддерживать его кампанию.
This means that the risk here is serious, important, and we must look at it with our eyes open.
Uriel, yes, rose-colored glasses, this is not about us. With such paranoid and inexplicable hatred of Ukraine, how likely is it that there will be nascent, slowly smoldering sympathy for the Russian Federation? Or perhaps this group is more focused on asserting itself and pursuing its political ambitions? In principle, they do not care at all about Putin, and about his fate, and about Russia. That's how it smolders there. Rots and is fine. It rots and is fine.
I think it depends on the person. I think people like Tucker Carlson and maybe David Sachs are really sympathetic to Russia and see Putin as the savior of Christendom. This is despite the fact that Putin himself persecutes Christians, especially those who are not Russian Orthodox, and creates serious problems for representatives of other faiths in Russia. In addition, many of those fighting against Ukraine are not Christians, but come from regions such as Dagestan and Chechnya. But this is of little importance to them. They look at Putin as a strong man who will save the Christian world, and they respect him. And Trump, JD, and Vance, well, it's not entirely clear. I think Trump respects strength, and in that sense, he admires the way Putin is demonstrating his strength. He likes that Putin embodies authority and is in control, that everyone obeys him and no one dares to contradict him. That's what he wants for himself. From this point of view, Trump respects the power that Putin represents, but on the other hand, I think Trump is not too concerned about Russia per se. Most likely, he does not care about what is happening in Russia. For him, it is a matter of personal self-love and profit. In the end, he will do what is beneficial to him, his company, and his allies. And, therefore, here, perhaps, there will be some opportunity. People need to understand this and talk to Trump and his advisors from that perspective. It is not worth discussing the defense of the free world, because Trump does not think about the free world. Recently, when asked about Taiwan and whether he would defend it, he replied something like, "Yes, I'm ready, but Taiwan has to pay." Trump sees America as insurance, as something that someone has to pay for. It's like a mafia, where protection is only offered to those who pay for it. For many, this is alien and difficult to perceive.
На страховку. Вот кто-то платит за страховку, также кто-то должен платить за американскую защиту. И вот, конечно, для таких, как мы, это чужое. Мне тяжело так понимать. Это как мафия.
The mafia says, if you want us to protect you, pay us. This is typical behavior of mafia structures, not the leaders of the free world. But Trump doesn't look at it that way. He looks at everything as a business trade. And this means that if Taiwan pays, we will defend Taiwan. Since Ukraine cannot pay, but instead uses its resources to protect and support itself, Trump is obviously less interested. If someone can change Trump's mind by making the argument that while we're spending money on defending Ukraine right now, it's going to be profitable in the long run and will save money in 10 years, maybe that will have an impact on him. But to be honest, I'm not very optimistic about the possibility of changing his mind. I think that if there is a future Trump administration, then the key issue will be Congress, and then it will be necessary to work with Congress, persuade Republicans in Congress, and so on. Because there are still allies here. There are Republicans in Congress like Mike McCall, Mike Rogers, and others who understand the importance of protecting countries like Ukraine.
But Trump has a super lever of pressure, at least that's what our diplomats say too. These are sanctions against Chinese companies that actually support the Russian military-industrial complex. However, given that Trump said in an interview with Dan Bloomberg that he considers sanctions against Russia to be unnecessary and ineffective, his position on this issue looks contradictory. This gives the impression that his views on sanctions and their effectiveness are not entirely consistent with the actual measures that are being taken. Or perhaps it remains in his hands, but the question arises, what interest does he have in using it? Why should he do this? Rivalry with China?
Of course, this remains in his hands. And now Biden could use sanctions against Russia more aggressively to stop China. And unfortunately, he does not do this. He does, but not enough. And Trump, I think, will not do this at all. What particularly interested me, and showed that J.D. Vance was looking at the situation from a psychological rather than a strategic point of view, was his opposition to the REPO Act. The REPO Act is a bill that passed Congress and allowed the president to confiscate Russian Russian assets located in the United States.
Был законопроект, который прошел Конгресс, который позволял президенту конфисковать русские деньги, которые существовали в США.
Russia has about $5 billion or more in the U.S., and that money is currently frozen. Our organization believes that these funds should be immediately confiscated and transferred to Ukraine. The RIPO Act provided for such confiscation, and J.D. Vance was one of the main senators who protested against the bill and tried to stop it. And why? That's what I don't understand. But why? This is not American money, and it does not affect our taxpayers. If Vance's argument is that it is necessary to protect the interests of American taxpayers, then why is he blocking a bill that would allow Russian money to be used to support Ukraine? Vance's only argument against this, frankly, is that he believes that it is not necessary to support and defend Ukraine, even if resources from the main enemy of the United States can be used for this.
Yes, this is really inexplicable. This probably fits into that paradigm of inexplicable attitude, either in the form of love or indifference, both to Ukraine and to Russia. Thank you very much not only for your professional explanations, but also for your position and work in various areas and vectors, and for our support. Thank you. See you again. I hope very soon.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you for taking the time.